And what we're concerned about is that Rishi Sunak has taken political decisions. It's been a political deal, really, a grubby deal, at the expense of the proper security considerations. And that is why we are putting down this motion that would require the government to release the security advice about those security lapses that Rishi Sunak received before making that reappointment decision.
Labour are trying to apply more pressure on Home Secretary Suella Braverman today as they try to get the government to release the advice given to Rishi Sunak before her appointment. We can speak to the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
The situation at Manston is much better now. Do we still need to see this advice?
Well, this is about Rishi Sunak's decision to reappoint Suella Braverman just 6 days after she was effectively sacked for breaching the ministerial code and for security lapses, even though it's since been reported other links to serious leak investigations and other serious lapses as well. We've also obviously had the news of the reappointment of Gavin Williamson with these serious complaints outstanding against him as well. And what we're concerned about is that Rishi Sunak has taken political decisions. It's been a political deal, really, a grubby deal, at the expense of the proper security considerations. And that is why we are putting down this motion that would require the government to release the security advice about those security lapses that Rishi Sunak received before making that reappointment decision.
Okay, let's move on and talk about migration. It's all related. Rishi Sunak, it looks like he's close to agreeing a deal with the French in which British officers will help French migrant patrols. They'll be in the control rooms, not necessarily on the coast, on the beaches. Whenever we've spoken to Labour about what their policy would be on immigration, you have always said, that it's about better cooperation with France. So you must be cheered by this proposed deal.
Well, I hope they have got a new agreement coming with France, because you're right, Labour has been certainly calling for much stronger agreements with France for some time. And that's the way to address these dangerous crossings that are putting lives at risk. But we need to see that it's got proper substance to it, because there's been a lot of promises made in the past that needs to include the security cooperation along the French coast, which there have been some briefings that might be included, but also the security cooperation to crack down on the criminal gangs and including those networks. We're proposing a big expansion of the National Crime Agency's work on criminal gangs, but that needs to be working with Europol and with the French authorities. And we'd also like to see, again, something we've been calling for, agreements that replace some of those measures that were in the previous Dublin Agreement around safe returns, around safe family reunion, some of those measures that would also help address the issues that the government promised to try and put in place, but has repeatedly failed to do so.
Do you think ID cards would help? Stephen Kinnock seems to think that it could be a good idea.
No, I think the issue is about employment enforcement. So people already have, whether it's biometric residence permits or passports and so on, that are requirements for working in the UK. But there is very little employment enforcement around illegal working, and also often that can also include exploitation as well. We have called for a long time for much stronger employment enforcement arrangements to make sure that proper standards are being met. Again, the government promised that would happen, but we still haven't seen the progress, and Labour would take a much stronger approach to that.
But would that mean basic ID cards for everyone?
No, in practice, people have already got identity, and for people who have come from abroad, who are working in this country, and we have lots of people who are doing really important jobs working across our country, but people already have work visas and biometric residence permits or passports that can all be checked as part of that and have to be as part of those employment decisions. So all of that is already in place. The issue is you don't have those employment checks. We don't have the employment enforcement. And that has impact more widely, because you end up with serious issues around exploitation. At its worst, it becomes modern slavery, and we don't have the action to address that, and just a system of that undermines legitimate businesses who are doing a great job but end up being undermined by this as well.
We've spoken to Alan Johnson, former Home Secretary, of course, on this programme quite recently. recently, and he said that he believes that's the one thing that would stop or limit this kind of migration, small boat migration. ID cards, proper actual ID cards, the kind that were discussed 20 years or so ago. But you're not talking about it on that scale.
No, I think those sorts of identification, everybody already has this, and particularly there's been introduced measures around biometric residence permits and so on for people who've, to go alongside people's passports. So that's why I think the issue is around enforcement rather than around, those sorts of discussions that we had, 20 years ago.
Right. Finally, I just want to talk to you about the front page of the Times. Welfare and pensions set to rise with inflation. It's a difficult thing for the government to have to try to balance the books, especially as we're heading into recession. Uprating benefits and pensions in line with inflation means that money has to be found elsewhere, chiefly in departmental cuts.
Well, the government promised things like the pension triple lock. Rishi Sunak made a commitment even just a few months ago to ensure that benefits were uprated in line with inflation. The fact that they've even been suggesting that they would row back on those commitments that everybody had just assumed would be in place really shows, I think, the damage that their mini budget did, the chaos that has created in the economy, and also I think sadly also reflects the damage that 12 years of low growth under the Conservatives have done. But what they shouldn't be doing is ending up as a result of this chaos not having any proper long-term plan for growth, not having any plan to support our public services, and ending up with those on the lowest income paying the price. And that is sadly what we've seen from the Conservatives. It is the wrong approach.